Can't blame them.
That's too funny. I think we should get to this one that we just got.
Sure.
So this one is from @Wayward Chad, or Chad Harris, I think is his name. Many see funeral directors, death, etc. as ghoulish, and that draws or repels them. How to get past that and have open, honest talks. #Talkdeath.
I think the main thing is to realize that this is something that is going to happen to everybody. You know, like it's not a ghoulish thing. It's not like a taboo subject. It's just that people don't want to talk about it. I was actually just talking with my husband about this the other day, where I think like a huge issue with American death culture is the lack of faith that people have nowadays. And what I mean is, you know, back in the day, everybody went to church. Everybody believed in God. You know, churches were packed on Sundays, at least in the Western New York area, where, you know, it was that thing with the culture which kind of united everybody. Today's day and age, there are so many different religions, so many different relationships that people have. It's not almost like we have one God. It's almost like we view ourselves as a God, in the fact that everybody else will die, but I'm not going to die. I'm going to live forever because it can't happen to me. So I don't think it's like a ghoulish thing in that kind of a sense. I just think that we need to realize as people, as humans, this is something that will happen to us. It's natural. That's a huge thing. You know, dying is a natural part of life. And I think the sooner you can kind of talk about your own mortality and your own death, not only the more you can get out of your life, because you will be living every day, you know, hopefully a little bit more fulfilling for yourselves and doing things that you want to do and whatnot, but once again, you know, it happens to everybody, so might as well talk about it. It's not taboo. We're not evil people over here in the death care industry trying to like get your souls, you know. We want to help you through this time. That's what our main thing is. We're in this industry to help you through a difficult time. We're on your team, really, is what it comes down to. So.
Well, speak for yourself, Lauren. I am evil over here. Pure darkness in this corner of the chat. Yeah, I think you're very right. I think that the secularization or the a-religious society that we're increasingly entering has changed death care a huge amount, because if you have, you know, I'm a-religious myself, and in some ways I wish that I belonged to a really strict religion that had codes not only in how to imagine death and how to imagine the afterlife and how to think about it that way, but also rituals that come with death and ways to understand what to do with the dead body. And when you have this whole community, death can be easier because you have things to participate in and you know what the rules are. But if you are me and my friends and a lot of my family, it's sort of like, well, we could do anything. We could do anything with our body, we could do anything with this ceremony, and ritual is still important, and ritual is still valid. And so we need better secular rituals. We need better rituals for people who don't necessarily have a belief in an afterlife or in a God, but still have a belief in interacting with family and transitioning at the time of death. And then, what was the first question initially?
The question initially was that many people see funeral directors and death as ghoulish, and it repels people, so how do you open up that conversation?
Right. Yeah, when in a society where death is absent, you're going to get people who fetishize death, because if you don't see it, you're going to turn it into zombies, and you're going to turn it into Walking Dead, and you're going to turn it into vampires, and you're going to turn it into other and extreme versions of itself. So the more that we see realistic, rational death as it actually is, the better that we're going to be at not fetishizing it and making it ghoulish.
Do you have an idea of what kind of rituals a secular world could take on in terms of death and dying?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, that's why I advocate for home funerals. I advocate for witness cremations, witness burials, participatory burials, green burials, things where the family is just much more involved. So tangible things to do. Washing, and this can exist absolutely in the traditional funeral industry as well. Just tangible things for the family to do, to show up and to wash the body or to help dress the body, to be present for those things, to actually watch the person being loaded into the cremation chamber, actually help lower the person into the ground and put dirt into the ground. Just things that people, tasks that can help in the way of grief, I guess.
And Lauren, do you see people doing that where you are? Or asking for those things?
You know, in my area, it's not like people are really asking to do those things. I mean, I've had a handful of people who maybe in their life they did their grandmother's hair, so when she passes away they asked if we could do her hair, and we definitely always encourage that. I mean, there are things that, you know, we do for you, but there are things that you can do for yourself as well. I just don't see a lot of it in the area that we're in, so.
Yeah, and that's fair, and that will, and in some ways, you know, that's on people like me, because what I'm trying to do is to get people to ask for that and to advocate for it. And there are places in the country where that's absolutely, you know, places on the East Coast, places in the South, where that's crazy talk. And it's not even necessarily that the funeral home, like Lauren was saying, isn't willing to do it and isn't willing to, you know, so if someone came to her funeral home and said, I want this crazy thing, I imagine that she would say, okay, we don't really do that, but we're going to figure out a way to have that experience for you or to replicate that experience for you. But if the actual people who are dying and the families don't have that information or aren't advocating for themselves, then yeah, it's gonna stay absolutely the status quo, because there's no need for anything to move forward. And in some places in the country, there isn't a need to move forward. There's a real comfort with the rituals that already exist, and that's perfectly fine too. We're not trying to say move forward at the sake of people's comfort. That's not what's going on at all. It's just that there's a lot of people who aren't necessarily served by the industry such as it is now. So we want the industry to continue to exist and the people who are served by it to continue to be served by it, but for people to also know that there are other options if they're not finding their meaning there.
Yeah, it's interesting because it could be liberating to have the option to, you know, do what you want to do because you don't have a religious ritual. But then at the same time, when it's such a, you know, if you don't plan ahead and it's such a, like, you know, a shocking event, then it's like, well, what do you do? So oftentimes people are almost forced to go with the traditional element, even if they don't believe in it or even if they don't want it, right? So it's a tough call.
Yeah. Well, someone was saying yesterday, what do you do if, because my funeral home is going to have home funerals as a part of the and family-centered death care, and they asked, what if there's an emergency, you know, home funeral? And I was like, I really doubt there are many emergency home funerals. No one's like, oh my God, we got to do the home funeral right now, out of nowhere. You know, if you're the type of person who wants this kind of really different thing, you have to plan ahead and you have to really do your research. And it's a much harder climb than showing up at the funeral home. You have to know what you want, and you have to know how to advocate it, and you have to know how to ask for it, and you have to know where to find it. So it's a much harder road.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the questions that